Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Please join me in welcoming our speaker, Lynn.
AA for older alcoholics. That isn't funny.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. And let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think.
We were young once, Molly, and these people don't realize that. I'm Len Wilder, and I'm an alcoholic. And I'm delighted to be here. What a treat this is for me. You have no idea. Because my early sobriety started in this room. It's changed a little bit. We've gotten rid of the wooden benches, and we made the coffee in the kitchen, and you got people sitting in the kitchen now. How many of you were here at this meeting 47 years ago? Well, I'm sorry, because I was the coffee maker. Coming up this morning, I immediately put in Zach Brown's new album, and I started to listen to that, and then I turned it off. And I started to think and to reminisce about what this building means to me and what it meant to me in my early sobriety, and, you know, thank God. Thank God for places like this. The most important thing I'm going to say today, as far as I'm concerned, is that Alcoholics Anonymous is the greatest happening in my lifetime. The greatest happening in my lifetime, and I've never forgotten that, and I never will. Tony, thank you for your patience and persistence. We've tried a long time to put this together, and I'm glad we did. You know, while I'm talking about coffee, I was newly sober in Alcoholics Anonymous and rummy as I could be. And this was a long, long time ago, and I was sitting in this room on a Monday night. And they said the coffee maker had gotten drunk. And could anyone make coffee? And I raised my hand. And I started to make coffee for that group in that room right back there. I didn't know that that had anything to do with being of service. I just knew that it made me feel better, and it made me feel what I could see in your eyes a little bit. And back then, we'd make the coffee. We had pottery mugs. We would serve the coffee on that counter, and after the meeting, we would wash the mugs, wash the coffee pots, and I can't tell you what that meant to me. I didn't even know it was a commitment, but I did it. And before I knew it, I was making coffee for 3 groups in this room, the Monday night, the Friday night, and this meeting right here that Ruth Lyons ran, and 2 other meetings outside of here, because I could make coffee. And there's another friend of mine here today that's been involved for a lot of years, and it's Molly's birthday, by the way, and I love her. She and I go way, way back, and what a thrill. Happy birthday to you. The Brentwood Beginners Meeting. It used to be the Brentwood Speakers Meeting, and a lady named Adele came up with the idea we should start a beginners meeting. And the old timers objected. But we started it anyway, and I became, in 1968, the coffee maker of the beginners meeting. And I don't have to tell you where that meeting is today. And it's a privilege always for me to come up and do that workshop. The first person we had was Alan McGinnis. And we used to have people come and do 4 weeks at a time. And thank God for the old timers in Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, they told me when they brought me back here, you need to get a sponsor, and I got one. You need to get a sobriety date, and I have one. It's March the 5th, 1965. And they said you need to get a home group, and I had 2 or 3, all on the west side. And we went to meetings morning, noon, and night, but I didn't start on the west side. I never want to forget from whence I cometh, because I know where I am today due to this gift that we've all been given. I'm a Californian by residence, a Kentuckian by birth, and an alcoholic by absorption. And I drank as much as I could for as long as I could, and that's it. And my story is one of both ends of the spectrum. I've just been on a business trip, 13 days. I was all over the Southeast and the Midwest, and I was back in my hometown with my business partner, and I showed him where I had grown up. And he said, "Wow, you drank all of this up?" I said, "Every bit of it." Because, you know, alcohol was my vehicle, and it continued to crash and to crash and to crash and to progress. And I grew up with all of the advantages that a human would ever want, and they were never enough, because the more I had, the more I wanted. And people started to talk to me very early in life, particularly about my attitudes. And it was very apparent that I had attitude problems. And when they brought me back to Alcoholics Anonymous, they continued to talk to me about my attitudes. And an interesting thing, I've learned most things in retrospect. I have to get out beyond them and look back, and I've done a lot of that over the years. And interestingly enough, after I got back to Alcoholics Anonymous, as my behavior started to change, my attitudes followed. But boy, did I have attitude problems. I grew up in a family where there was no drinking. I grew up in a religion where there was no drinking, but that didn't affect me, because what I found out when I discovered that magic elixir, that it enabled me to do things comfortably that I was not able to do. I grew up in a family and in an era where you didn't talk about anything below the surface. Now, I don't blame them. I don't blame my environment. I blame none of that. It's a disease called alcoholism. But I can tell you, sitting at the dinner table at night, you certainly didn't say, "Oh, I've got tremendous feelings of impending doom." Because everything was fine. And they told me, "You be a man. You be a man." And you know, I tried desperately to do that. And my perception of being a man was just to go forward, and I had no idea, none, until after I'd been here a little while, the underlying fears that were driving me. Because I had them camouflaged. I had them camouflaged for a long, long time. And I was given some abilities in several areas. I was a pretty good athlete. And you know, I drank that up. I drank a good education up. I drank my family up. I drank my friends up. I drank everything up near and dear to me. And what I basically talk about is the last 2.5 years of my drunkenness, because I never want to forget that, because I went downhill in a hurry. We didn't have a lot of young people 47, 48 years ago. Today, we have tons of them. But you know, in Los Angeles back then, we had the Poly Hall Young People's group on Saturday night, and I was privileged to be part of a group that started one in the Valley, a young people's meeting. But we didn't have young people like we do today. But I said earlier, thank God for the old timers, because those are the ones that I just stayed with for a long, long time. I continued to drink after I got out of college, and my disease started to gallop. I went to work for a large company, and it wasn't long before they were asking me why I drank the way I did, why I said the things I said, did the things I did. "Lynn, why do you do these things?" And I knew that they knew about Lynn Wilder. And when I thought anybody knew about me, then I'd make a change. And I made a lot of changes, and a lot of changes were made for me. And I lost this job as a direct result of my disease of alcoholism. And another door opened very quickly and I got re-involved in athletics at a coaching and scouting level. And here I was, a leader of men every day and a drunk every night, the Jekyll and Hyde that we know so much about. And you know, I don't want to forget that. And I lost that job as a direct result of my disease because it was progressing. And I found myself with a U-Haul trailer on the back of my car going through the mountains back into my hometown, being willing, because I had no other choice, to go in the family business, which was 3 generations old. And I looked around, and my friends were all meeting their responsibility. At least that was my perception. They all had jobs, they were working, they were married, and I thought, that's the answer, I need to get married. Now here's an immature, insecure, irresponsible drunk, unfortunately for the lady that was involved. And we got married, and I don't have to tell you what happened there, but we had a daughter out of that marriage, and fortunately for them, they were able to get away from me, get back to Chicago, and I went on with my run. And that daughter has just spent the weekend with us. Molly knows her. She's an incredible woman today, and God love her. I did not see her. I asked her this morning. I said, exactly when was it that I came through O'Hara and you came to the airport and we met? And she tried to figure it out, and I've always said that I didn't see her for 10 years. After talking to her this morning, probably more like 11 and a half years, I did not see her as a direct result of my disease. And I went on, and I could take you all over this country, in and out of AA. On Christmas Day, 50 years ago this coming Christmas, I was rolled up in the fetal position. I had become a blackout drinker. I didn't know where I was. I was on the south side of Atlanta, Georgia. The oil company I'd gone to work for out of college, there was a man there, and it was whispered that he was a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, I avoided him. But this particular Christmas morning, I called him up, and he and his wife came to get me, and they're the ones that brought me through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous for the first time. And I didn't want to be alcoholic, and I didn't want to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. So everything you said went in one ear and out the other, because I wasn't seeing, I wasn't hearing, and I didn't want to be. And that continued. And little by little, we didn't have treatment facilities then, but they would detox you. But then we had a lot of 12-step calls. We used to make a lot of 12-step calls before treatment came into the world. And they would come sit with you, give you fruit juice and Karo syrup, and I started to develop DTs. And they would walk with you and sit with you, and I went through all of that. But I kept making changes all the way. 1984, in June, I got off an airplane at LAX, and I came out of a blackout. I had never been to California. And I got off that airplane, and I told a cab driver, and the way I'd gotten here was out of Dallas. I'd checked out of a hotel, and you could write counter checks in, and I wrote a counter check for my hotel bill. I had no account. I got an airline ticket with no account, and I arrived, and I had $300 in my pocket, which was a lot of money back then. And I said, take me to the nicest place on the beach. And they took me to Santa Monica. And from there, for 7.5 to 8 months, I was on and off the streets in Los Angeles. And I don't want to forget that. I'd been 86 by the end of that time from every halfway house, and we didn't have that many in Los Angeles. I'd been put out of the Bimini. I'd been put out of the Royal Palms, the Shoreham, Chandler Lodge in the Valley, because I was still drinking, not my drink of choice, but of necessity. I'd become a wine drinker. And the wine I drank never saw a grape. And but I was still defending my right to drink. It's amazing, still defending my right to drink. I could take you all over. I had my second seizure out here, and Matter of fact, I had it in the Church of Religious Science, the mother church. And they took me down to central receiving one more time. County wouldn't even take me anymore. And that's where my disease had taken me. The bottle had beaten me to death. I ended up, well, it wasn't a total end, but at the Cecil Hotel, living with 2 other winos, and I was put on the street, not by the hotel, but by the 2 winos. And a social worker found me and took me to a place where a man would always, as a flop house, a man would always give me a bed. And he did. And she was so concerned about my condition, she went home, called her family doctor, and he had a patient that was a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And she called this man, and he and another man came and got a key and came in to get me. And I tried to get up off the floor and tell them who I was. And I was a sick, dying drunk. And they were to take me out of there and to put me in a place called the Beverly Lake Sanitarium on Fairfax. It hadn't been there for years, but that's where it happened. I had no idea I'd had my last drink. I had no idea that a surrender had taken place in my lifetime. I knew none of that. I cried out one more time in silent desperation for help. I knew AA didn't work. I knew God, there was no God, because why was I in the shape that I was in? But I cried out in silent desperation for help, and the help was there. And it's called Alcoholics Anonymous. And they sent a man in every day. I was in DTs. I absolutely shook to death. And they would send this man in, and his name was Ray Nelson, and he would bring the big book with him, and he would read to me, and I thought, oh my God, will he ever leave? And he would leave and go out and smoke a cigarette and come back in. And I thought he had to be one of the founders of AA. Little did I know he had 5 months more than I had. But they said, go see this drunk and read the book to him. And you know, I was there and I had a lot of physical problems. I know I had emotional problems, mental problems. I'm certain unlike you. I had physical problems. I had moral problems. I had them all, like we get here. And I was beaten. I was absolutely beaten. And a couple of men that were involved in my early recovery and made that 12-step call, called the man that was head of the Mary Lynn Foundation and convinced him to let me come out of that Beverly Lake, go back into the Bimini. So I went back into the Bimini, and I became a dishwasher, and I was still shaking pretty badly. And they said, maybe you ought to dry the dishes. And, you know, I did that. And I did whatever was asked of me. And we went to meetings morning, noon, and night. And I started to hear speakers, and I was really rummy. And I was to hear a man very early. I can tell you the first speaker I heard, they took me to the Arlington group right out of Beverly Lake. And Jack Prose was the speaker. And they put me on the back row, and I thought the meeting went for 6 hours. It was an hour meeting, and I thought, will this guy ever quit talking? But I was to hear a man early in my sobriety, and my only thought was, no one can live the way this man talks. No one. And a few weeks later, I was to hear him again, and he came over to me and said, how you doing, son? And I said, terrific. And he knew better. He wrote his name on the back of a card. I had no idea who he was. He said, I want you to call me tomorrow. I didn't call him. A couple of 3 weeks later, they took me to the Beverly Hills Men's Stag, which was his home group, and he came to me immediately and said, you didn't call. I said, no. He said, if you don't call me tomorrow, I'm going to call Pat Wigger. And he was the founder of the Mary Lynn Foundation, an ex-cop, and I was terrified of him. So I called this man, and he started to pick me up, and we went all over greater Los Angeles. I still get goosebumps talking about this, where he was carrying the message of Alcoholics Anonymous and everyone loved him. And he talked to me about not only the program, but about his relationship with Bill, our co-founder, and about his and Elsa's relationship with Bill and Lois and all the people. And, you know, how blessed I was. And sometimes he couldn't come, and they would give me a pass at the Bimini, and I'd ride the bus and transfer and go to his office. And little by little, things started to happen for me. And, you know, I would go when they finally, I got out of the Bimini, they released me from the Bimini. I moved to San Fernando Valley, moved in with 2 sober alcoholics that had jobs, and I was unemployed and unemployable. I got up every morning, walked 2.5 miles to the old clubhouse on Radford. And I'd be there when the doors opened, and those old timers back then, some of them I used to think, I think they did eat nails for breakfast because they were tough. They were tough, and it was exactly what I needed. And they told me things like, tell the truth. And I said, which truth? Because you see, I didn't know the truth. I didn't know. The uncovering process had just started for me. The uncovering, and little by little, the discovering, the discarding process was all just in its infancy with me. And little by little, I started to do those things. And I went to meetings, though. Went to meetings, whether it's in the valley at the old nest, or whether it meetings in the valley, we'd come over the hill to the Brentwood speakers meeting. We'd come here, and I came here, I must have been 7 months into my sobriety when I was coming here on a regular basis to 3 meetings a week. The 3 that I told you where I had the privilege of making the coffee. But that's what we do here, you know. And we get commitments. I didn't know they were commitments. I told you earlier, I didn't know I was being of service. One of the things they told me early in sobriety, Lynn, you've got to learn to love yourself. I said, what? I don't even like myself. Until you started to put your arms around me and to love me, it took a long time for me to really get inside and to understand that love. And boy, do I understand it today, because that's what we're all about. It's all about love. And you know, I tell everybody in my life every day today, everyone, that I love them, because I truly do, because you've given me that gift. And little by little, I got into the steps, and I finally got through the 8th and 9th, and my original sponsor knew that I'd left part of it out, and I knew it too. And it was that fear of rejection. And it was that daughter that I just talked about up front. She was in Chicago, and he told me exactly how to do that, and I did just the opposite. Because you see, I'm a manipulator. So I was pulling a lawyer off bar stools here in Los Angeles, pretending to carry the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. And what I was doing, I wanted to get visitation rights, and he was successful. And I got on an airplane to LAX to go back to Chicago. I called her mother. I said, I'm coming back. I want to spend the weekend with Gail. That's our daughter. And I'd done everything but take a drink. I was on the worst dry drunk I've ever been on. I pray I'll ever be on. I got off that airplane, went to a hotel in downtown Chicago. You taught me well. I called Alcoholics Anonymous. They said, you're 2.5 blocks from a meeting. It was a meeting called the Mustard Seed. I hit the pavement and walked in that meeting at 6 o'clock. I walked out an hour later, less crazy. I called her mother, and she said, Lynn, she doesn't want to see you. And thank God it happened that way, because I got on my knees that night in that hotel room, and I gave it up. And I asked God for help, and I got up and wrote both Gail and her mother separate letters of amends. And I went down the next morning, and I mailed them, and I got on that airplane to come back to California, and I was given another gift, the gift of freedom. And that's so, so important. I stayed in touch with that daughter, and about a year later, her mother called and said, Lynn, she'd like to see you. And that's been many, many, many years ago. She came into Laguna Beach, into our home, many, many, many years ago. And I was privileged to be able to put her through college. Her mother had remarried and had a child, and Pam and I had married, and we had 2 children, and at her graduation here in Los Angeles, I sat between Gail's mother and Pam. And when she walked up on that stage to get her diploma, her mother turned to me and said, Lynn, I can't thank you enough for what you've done for Gail. I said, no. No, don't thank me. Thank Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank Alcoholics Anonymous. Because nothing would be possible in my life without the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. She went on to become an attorney, and she's been out here for a lot of years. And she's, you know, it was just wonderful having her yesterday. And I've been traveling a lot and haven't been here and hadn't seen her. And it was just absolutely wonderful the last 24 hours to be with her. My second year of sobriety, I was sitting in the Brentwood speakers meeting, And the most beautiful lady I'd ever seen in my life walked to the podium to read chapter 5. She was 5'10". She was blonde, and she was drop dead gorgeous, and it's a program of attraction, and I wanted what she had. Her name was Pamela Floyd, and it became Pamela Floyd Wilder, and what a life we had together. And we had our first daughter here in Los Angeles before we moved to Laguna in 1972. And we went to meetings all over. I mean, out here, the Brentwood, the Palisades, Malibu, in this room. I was secretary, and I'll talk about this after I'd been coffee maker, but I had become secretary of the Monday night meeting in this room. And I was in the kitchen one night, and they came back and said, "We've got a drunk here." I said, "Well, is it a problem?" Said, "Yeah, he won't put out his cigar." So I said, "Where is he?" He was sitting right in the back, right up against the door on the wooden bench, and this redhead came in and sat down next to him. So I went over to him, and I said, and he was making a lot of noise. And she was trying to quiet him and couldn't, and I said, "Look, we're going to have to ask you to leave, and you're going to have to put that that cigar out." He said, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm the secretary of this group." Well, this is what he did to me. His name was Bob Harrigan. And I knew some of you in here would remember him. And he and Yvonne, matter of fact, I called her to see if she could come to this meeting today, and then I was going to take her to lunch. But she and Paula and Paula's daughter and another friend of hers flew to Honolulu on Thursday. But that's where I met them, and you find friendships in here, and you bond with people like no other area of your life. It's unbelievable how we come together in here, how we understand one another, we love one another. We get outside of meetings and talk badly about each other, but I want to tell you one thing. We're always there to help. And we moved to Laguna Beach. Our daughter was born here, Allison. We moved to Laguna Beach where our son Jim was born, and life was good. Pam was very active with the women in Alcoholics Anonymous, and what a lovely, lovely lady she was. I was active with the men. We were both active together. Our home was kind of the center down there of everything, and life was good. In 1984, I'd talked at the Florida Convention on a Saturday night. My friend Ramona, the Al-Anon from Oklahoma, was with me. She said, "Let's go to the room and call Pam," and we did, and her mother answered. I said, "Why are you there?" And she said, "Pam's in the hospital." I said, "For what?" She said, "Oh, I don't know. It's some type of infection." So I immediately called the hospital. She said, "It's nothing. It's a lower back pain," but it was something, because 10.5 months later, she was dead. It was leukemia. And some of you ladies in here knew her, and knew her well, and what an incredible lady she was. But I want to tell you, you were there. You were there in every area of our life. You were at UCLA giving blood. You were taking care of our children in Laguna. You were doing whatever was necessary. You, members of Al-Anon, members of Alateen, I had the privilege at that time of co-sponsoring the Alateen group. You were there because we help one another, and I've watched it go on and on and on within the framework of our program. There's nothing like the fellowship we have here across the world. Nothing. And that's what kept me coming for a long, long time so I could get some clarity, was the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous before I could get into the workings of the steps, before I understood the traditions. And you know, life goes on. Life, there are bumps in the road, but if we stay on this path, and it doesn't matter where we are on the path, as long as we're on the path together, everything's going to be all right. I will promise you one thing, whatever's going on in your life today, in here we have no newcomers, so this is like preaching to the choir, and you know it, but whatever's going on in your life changes, because change is one thing that happens. And I'm very careful to never tell a newcomer that things are going to get better. There's a possibility of that, but I will tell them, yes, your life is going to change, because I've never met anyone in here that was here by mistake. There are no shortcuts, there are no substitutes, but it's an incredible way to live. I know of no other program anywhere. And I'm sure you all have read around the Olympics, around the Olympic Village and everything, how Alcoholics Anonymous is set up. right outside Olympic Stadium for meetings, for everything. That was just unbelievable. Just unbelievable. I don't know whether you all have read or not. They just had a program in India where they notified the members of AA, and they're few compared to the number of people in India, that Alcoholics Anonymous was going to be mentioned in this program midday. Within 48 hours after that program aired, they had satellite stations set up to take phone calls. They couldn't handle them. There were 120,000 phone calls in India. That's what Alcoholics Anonymous, it's spread. We're the fortunate ones. We got here where it started. But this thing is spread all over the world, and it's going to continue to spread. And you know what? We're the messengers. We carry the message of Alcoholics Anonymous every day in our lives, and I never want to forget that. A couple of things, and I mentioned them, and I'm going to sit down, that have been real important to me, and I didn't talk about them for a long, long time, and then I started to about 15 years ago. Chuck called me. I just celebrated. I was about 2.5 years sober. And he said, Elsa and I are going to be in Connecticut such and such a weekend, and I'm going to be in New York with Bill on Monday. And if you can get back there, you can meet Bill. I've never forgotten it. I caught the red eye out of LAX, got in a cab, went to that old General Service office, and spent the afternoon listening to those two men. And then I had dinner that night with Lois and Bill and Chuck and Elsa. Went back and caught the red eye back to LAX. You know, my cup runneth over. One of the last things Bill said to me, if you ever come back to New York, you call me. The following year, I'd start doing a little business in New York. And I was going back, and I called Chuck, and I said, you know, I don't want to bother him. I hear his health's not good. He said, call him. I was in Midtown. I had a meeting canceled. I called General Service office and just started to talk. I said, this is Lynn Wilder from California. I want to leave a message for Bill. They put me on hold. The next voice I heard was his. He said, where are you? I told him. He said, get in a cab and come down here. And I did. And he came out and got me and took me in his office, and he had 2 bottles of Coca-Cola and 2 sandwiches, and he shut the door. And he talked to me for the better part of 2 hours on nothing but the traditions. And I'd like to tell you that I knew a lot about the traditions. I knew nothing. I'd heard him read in meetings and everything. I think of all the writings that he did for us, that the traditions were his favorite, because he had a difficult time getting them approved. But thank God they were. I got back to Los Angeles. I called a friend of mine that had really loved the traditions. His name was Chuck Nesbitt. And he and I got sober together. And we found a little traditions meeting, and every week we would go. And you know that we kind of leave the traditions alone, but they're as important, in my opinion, as the steps are. And the traditions also can apply in our everyday living, in our relationships. And that's the area of my life where I've had to do the most work. 26.5 years ago, the Thanksgiving after Pam had passed away, I had a house full of people. I knew that I needed something. And I called Elsa the week after Thanksgiving and had lunch with her. And she looked at me with that smile, and she said, Lynn, I think you better turn yourself into Al-Anon. And you know what? I did. And I didn't go in there, someone that had a lot of years in Alcoholics Anonymous. I went in there as a newcomer. And I can stand here today and tell you that I've been consistent in Al-Anon, and my home group is the Men's Stag. We have about 70 men that we started 24 years ago in Laguna Beach on Tuesday night. And that program has taken me to a different level. And that program for me is about relationships. I was almost 20 years sober, and a man asked me one night, Len, what kind of relationship do you have with yourself? I said, wonderful. I was coming back from East San Diego County from an AA meeting one night by myself, and I got to thinking about that. And I became willing one more time to get vulnerable and to take a look at that. And I did, and it took me to a deeper level. And I'm so grateful for that program because they go hand in hand. And I have a lot of alcoholics come in today said the steps are the same. No, they're not. Well, they are. Well, there's one word that's different, but the Al-Anon steps and the AA steps go hand in hand, and it's incredible what it will give you. And you hear people talk about all their qualifiers. I stop with I've got a qualifier, and it's me. And that's it. And that's it. And I could stand up here and an old timer that many of you know up here, that's, I will not mention his name, he gets enough press anyway. Every time I'm either at the Pacific group or the Big Book group, he always walks up to me and says, "Are you here to give your Al-Anon talk?" And I tell him right away, if I thought it'd help you, I would. You know, one thing we have to do here, what we're doing this morning, we have to laugh and scratch. We have to do that because stay on the light side, because it's so important for all of us. I was privileged to be in Miami in 1970 when Bill gave his last talk, and I'd gone out to the restroom and I was coming back down the hall and they were rolling him in with the tubes in and everything, and I reached down and kissed him on the cheek and said, "I love you." I don't even think he knew who I was, but I've never forgotten moments like that. A lady that I did have a relationship with, Elsa was one, she was like a surrogate mother, but I really had a good relationship with Lois Wilson. And I met her in Arkansas in the early 70s. And when we had her in our home, and we were together a lot. And we were leaving Dallas one Sunday night. We'd both participated in a conference in the 70s. And I was going to New York on business, and she was going home. And I didn't even know we were on the same flight. And I saw her, and I said, "Oh, could I sit with you?" And I went to the counter. She said, "I'd love that." And I asked her a question. I've never, ever forgotten it and never will. I said, "Lois, what do you think the most important thing is that we have to remember?" And she thought for a moment, and then she said, "Lynn, the willingness to let go." The willingness to let go. Is that easy to say and tough to do? You bet. But I'm so blessed. I can't tell you what it's meant to me to be here this morning, where it all started for me, and it's all still here. And I'm going to close with what I always close with, and it's really what I'm trying to share. And it's the story of a man that owned a fine Swiss watch. And he loved it more than any possession he'd ever owned. And it would stop running, and then it would run. He would wind it and stop running. He went through a series of watchmakers. And he knew not what else to do. And one morning, very early, in his den with his little desk lamp on, one more time he was winding that watch. And as he started to put it on, he noticed what he thought were a couple of scratches. And they weren't scratches at all. It was a small inscription that said very simply, "In case of trouble, return to Maker." In case of trouble, return to Maker. Because God could and would and does. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I love being sober. And I love all of you. Thank you.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.